there, and the idea that I got when I researched her history was that the two of you were very close. And her name was Jennifer Besemer, and she was 50 years old at the time that she passed away, correct?
Yes.
And a mother of 12?
Yes. 3 of them were stepchildren, but 9 of them called her mom.
And how many of those children were still at home?
There were 3 at home when she passed. Well, and 2 other ones that were home because it was summer, because they were in college. So there generally is 5 to 6 that were living there, but now they're back in school for the most part. So there are some part-time kids that were there, but they're anywhere from age 5 up to the oldest was 30. And 6 of them were adopted children. It was a blended family. So lots of fun for holidays.
Wow. So, do you want to tell us what the history is? When did Jennifer become ill, and then from there forward, her story?
Sure. She, my sister did have a compromised immune system. She was, had a history of cancer, but was cancer-free when she contracted the virus. She had gone to, she was doing really good about keeping herself safe, staying home. But she had a follow-up appointment, and we're pretty sure that's where she contracted the virus. She had a follow-up appointment related to her. And she was in a research study actually for immunotherapy, and it was a very promising study because again, she was the first time she had been cancer-free 100%. It was April 20th that she went to the ER because her fever spiked. She wasn't feeling very well, had a little bit of a cough, but she thought she just had a cold. She never thought it was COVID. So she went to Akron General Hospital. Her husband drove her, and then she was quickly admitted. That next morning is when we found out her test was positive for COVID. And then she was in a regular room until the 27th or 28th. I think it was the 28th, because that's the last time we received any messages from her on her phone. So she was FaceTiming the first few days and then texting because it was too hard for her to talk. She would start to cough. So she would FaceTime, or then she started to text. The 28th was our last correspondence for her because she was taken to the ICU and put on a ventilator. From that point, she was on a ventilator for 6 weeks. In the ICU. Around 5 weeks, she actually was given a trach, and she was going to be stepped down into a rehab center. She was only in the rehab center for a day and a half before they had to send her back because she wasn't responding, and her reliance on the life support was much more significant than they thought it should be. So they ordered an MRI, and they came back and let us know that her brain had been affected, and she was not going to be able to ever wake up. So it was very difficult. That was a terrible day. That was on June 3rd, and then on June 4th, during the process of those 6 or 7 weeks she was in the hospital, we always believed that she was going to make it. We had no reason to believe that she was not going to make it. She was very strong-willed. She was very much a fighter. And they didn't give us a lot of hope. The nurses were great. The doctors just were very much lost. They didn't know what they were doing. I mean, that's the feeling that I got from them. Like they were trying to treat it as if it was something that they were familiar with. Like, we'll treat it as if we'll treat what we know as far as pneumonia, or we'll treat the ARDS, and we'll give her some antibacterial, we'll give her some antiviral, but they really felt like they were just shots in the dark, and it was so aggravating because they just didn't know, and partly not by any fault of their own, but I also felt like the doctors that we had had, not all of them, but there was one in particular that was such a negative approach. And I felt like never like a negative approach would result in a negative outcome. So I went to the ombudsman of the hospital, and I was just very, very disheartened with her approach, because that very first like week of her in the ICU, that doctor was basically saying, I think you guys need to give up and let her go. Like, what? What are you talking about? Like, it's only been a week in the ICU, and I had no idea why she would even suggest that. And in her opinion, and it may have been a cultural thing, she was, had a different culture than we did. She like, is this what your sister would really want? Even if she survives the ICU, she'd have to go to rehab, and it could be years of therapy. And she was passing a judgment on our family as far as what we felt was right for my sister. So that was very difficult. And I remember my conversation was, I actually had a conversation with Jennifer prior to her going in the vent. So Jennifer and I did have a conversation before she knew she was going to go into the ICU. But she let me know, just give me a chance to fight, is what she said. So I'm sorry if I get emotional. She said, if I have any chance at all, give me a chance to fight. Don't give up on me. So I knew already going into it that she would want to be on the vent, that she wouldn't want us to give up on her, because she was very much a fighter. She had a lot of reasons to come home, obviously. So, and she did really fight. Even the doctors were saying that they were surprised that she lived as long as she did on the ventilator, because someone with her history typically would not survive that long. So every time they said, oh, this is bad news, she's probably not going to make it through the night, she would rebound, and then she would survive another week. So it was up and down, and her statistics, the longer she's on the vent, the worse her survival odds were. But the doctors, and I tried to explain it to the advocate, the patient advocate, like, would you want a doctor that says, I'm sorry, your sister only has a 5% chance of survival, just give up? Or do you want the doctor to say, the good news is she still has 5% chance of survival? It's just the matter of perspective. So we were still grasping, because there's 100 people in a room, and my sister, and there's only 5 people getting out alive. My sister is going to be the one that gets out alive. That was my belief in her, her ability to get better. So it wasn't until the point where they told us that the myelin in her brain was deteriorated to the point where she was not going to recover. There's nothing they could do for that. Then we had to make the decision to let go. And that was when I felt okay at that point, because I know that Jennifer would be understanding of our decision. Sorry. It's been 6 months now